Aloha, this is Emily Thoreau-Threat, host of the Grief and Happiness podcast. Every Friday, I share with you my love notes, giving you a little something to think about as you navigate your grief journey, finding happiness expanding along your way. Every Tuesday, I post my regular podcast, sharing wonderful conversations with people you can relate to and offer you encouraging ideas and helpful inspiration. And I invite you to our Grief and Happiness Alliance gatherings for free every week on Zoom. Information provided in the show notes.
Aloha. My podcast for you today is Going It Alone. In an online meeting I was attending, we were introducing ourselves, and when I told them about my book, they all wanted to talk about their grief. Most of the group expressed how they hadn't really dealt with their grief because it was hard for them to talk about. They said things like they didn't think people would want to hear about it, or they didn't want to bring other people down, or that they didn't want to deal with the sadness that comes to them when they do talk about the grief. They also pointed out that they knew grieving people who also were dealing with their loss. Right now, it seems like we're all dealing with some form of grief, whether it's the loss of a loved one or the loss of a job or a home or an income or a pet or anything important in our lives. And most of us just deal with our grief on our own, and then wonder why we're having such a hard time. When grieving, people tend to withdraw from other people to avoid the sadness, the crushing pain, or the reactions they get when they mention it. Does this sound like you or someone you know? With my own grief, I tended to keep it to myself for the first couple of months. I just didn't want to talk to anyone, and I didn't want to listen to anyone either. Hearing them talk about anything other than my loss was difficult to deal with. How could they care about what to fix for dinner or a new purchase they made? Eventually, I got to a point where I did want to talk or listen, but by then, I needed to connect with people again. I tried to find groups on social media that I could join and be able to communicate, but I discovered so much sadness. At first, I was replying to every devastating story I read, and in the process, I seemed to be absorbing that sadness. I'd stop writing when I was in tears, and I realized that doing this wasn't helping anyone. The people who were writing their stories just needed to tell their stories and weren't prepared to listen to a response. I assumed that because I never received a response from anyone, I wrote too. Eventually, I decided to find new friends, and I created a meetup group and invited people to join me to write about what they were grieving about. This worked. Meeting face-to-face, where we were all able to share and respond to each other, we all realized how much we needed to share our stories. By meeting with this new group, I became more comfortable in reaching out to friends, and they responded. I think they always wanted to, but weren't sure what to say. My reaching out to them broke the ice, and we easily fell back into the relationships we had before my loss. And when they were ready, they talked to me about how the loss affected them too. If you feel stuck now, don't despair. People still love you. New people will love you too. When you're ready, open your heart and allow people back in.
Thanks for listening, and be sure to order your Grief and Happiness Handbook and cards on Amazon. All profit from these sales go directly to the Grief and Happiness Alliance nonprofit organization to support these podcasts and all that the organization does to provide comfort and support to those who are dealing with grief and loss. Mahalo. Thank you.